Worship, I know everybody probably understands that word intellectually when we say it, but we'd like to just kind of go beneath the surface a little bit this morning. I want to read something from a writer long gone. He was a pastor in the Christian Missionary Alliance movement in the 1960s, and he was a kind of a bright and shining star, but he came and went quickly. His name was Tozer, A.W. Tozer maybe, better known. Some of you may have read his classic book is called The Pursuit of God. He wrote other books, Born After Midnight, God Tells the Man Who Cares. If you haven't read A.W. Tozer, highly recommend it. Start with The Pursuit of God. In that book, he writes these words: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. The history of mankind will probably show that no people has ever risen above its religion, and man's spiritual history will positively demonstrate that no religion has ever been greater than its idea of God. I know there's a lot there. It's worth taking a picture of maybe, but worship is pure or base as the worshiper entertains high or low thoughts of God. For this reason, the gravest question before the church is always God himself. And the most portentous fact about any man is not what he at given time may say or do, but what he in his deep heart conceives God to be like. And this is the line that I love. We tend by a secret law of the soul to move towards our mental image of God. Say that again. We tend by a secret law of the soul, almost like an internal GPS. We move towards our mental image of God. It's true not only of the individual Christian, but of the company of Christians that composes the church. Always the most revealing thing about the church is her idea of God.
Think about that, because it's worth thinking about. Tozer's books are not very thick, but they take you a long time to read them, because it's like this. You have to read a paragraph, then go, well, I'm going to go get a cup of tea and try this again, and read it one more time. But we tend by a secret law of the soul to move toward our mental image of God. He's not talking just directional here, physical directional. He's saying we become like what we worship. Our image of God, that image that we worship, is what we become like. And you can see this in all the religions of the world, and including Christianity. Mm-hmm. As a missionary, one of the things you first want to find out is, well, what is the belief system of the land? Be it secularism or some kind of polytheism or animism. What's going on there? What do they picture God like? And that is the direction that the individual moves towards in their becoming, and the entire society moves towards that in their becoming. And what Tozer is saying here is that the individual believer and the church moves towards and becomes like what they think God is like.
You know, when you have human beings in any situation, in any context, you're inevitably going to have some kind of friction between human beings, some kind of conflict. I know that may be shocking to you, but I think it's true.
Not us, though.
We get along perfectly. Right? I mean, there's always going to be, because of humanity's basic nature, there's going to be conflict, whether it's the context of politics, or the context of economy, or the context of religion, relationships, marriage, and so forth. And whenever I talk to somebody who's in some kind of conflict, I always am aware of the fact that the conflict is what we call around here the downstream issue. And what I look for in a conflict, or two people who are trying to resolve an issue, is their idea of God. Because somewhere in the answer to that question is the answer or the way forward in the conflict. You see, if I've got a couple who are arguing, and sometimes when I listen to their idea of God is, well, God is like me. He's a Republican, or he thinks like a man, or he agrees with me, or something. And then what you find is they have a God who's, it reminds me of the bobblehead Jesus that taxi drivers put on the dashboard and other kind of, he's kind of like your patron buddy, right? He agrees with everything. He thinks like me. But sometimes I think we find that God shocks us because he doesn't think like us at all.
So what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at the Christmas story through the Gospels in sort of two different angles, both Gospel angles, but one from one writer, Luke, and another from Matthew. And God has moved on both of them to write down the Gospel, but they're doing it from two different camera angles in a way. They're seeing two different perspectives. And pay attention to, as we read the story, what do you think the main players, because you'll recognize them as they come up. What do you think their view of God is? What do you think they imagine their God to be like? And they tend to act in response to that as well. But before we get there, let's look at the prophet and what he says is going to happen. That's what we've been doing for the last few weeks. In Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, it says, "But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." It's a prophecy hundreds of years before Jesus is born, naming the place, not the time, but the place. So the people of Israel knew, well, one day there's going to be a Messiah. There's a lot we don't know about him, but one thing we do know is that he's going to be born in Bethlehem.
And then Luke writes, "In these days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world." And so this is the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone went to their own town to register. So what's happening is all of a sudden the entire region is moving, because people who had moved away from their birthplace are now required to go back to their birthplace. And so it's this, again, a movement of peoples ordained by God and decreed by a human ruler. And so God has people on the move, specifically a couple named Joseph and Mary. They went down to up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, down to Bethlehem, the town of David, because Joseph belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. Luke, this man of detail. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Isn't that crazy? You know, we've read this story so many times. We said in the very first week, 2 Sundays ago, that sometimes I think we cease to wonder at it because we cease to stop and look at it. That God comes in under the radar after hundreds of years of prophecy, hundreds of years of getting people ready, and he's away from home. He's born to I'm sure a freaked out teenage girl who would rather be around family, but now she's on the road. There are no hotel rooms available. They're making do with what they have. There's no one to advocate for them. You know what I mean? This innkeeper who said, well, you can sleep in the barn, or however we perceive that, you know, there's no one to come and say, no, do you realize who's asking? Do you realize who these people are? They're unknowns. They're just unknowns, under the radar. They didn't come with an entourage. They didn't come with some kind of credentials. And that would be the pattern of this Messiah throughout his whole life. That would be the pattern, under the radar. Not the way we would have imagined it.
Just a reminder, too, that this isn't an accident, but that God is purposefully setting the stage. He's moving things around to bring his son into being in a very vulnerable place, right? Because he said Bethlehem's going to be the place, and then he could have done that any way he wanted to, but he purposefully did it in this humble way. We continue in the story, and starting in verse 8, in chapter 2, it says, "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night." That's what they did for a living. That was their life. "And angels of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified," not a part of their normal, everyday life. So they're expecting a very normal night, and instead angels show up, and they are not just afraid, they are terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." That's a crazy sign.
I know. I mean, if you were like looking for a sign, right?
Mm-hmm. How do you know? How do we know it's going to be the Messiah? Yeah. Well, he'll be the one laying in a cattle trough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not how we bring it in. That's not how we bring in royalty.
Suddenly a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who were lying in a manger.
Wouldn't you pay attention to the sequence? He says first, "This will be a sign to you. You'll find a baby wrapped in cloths lying in a manger." And then suddenly a great crowd of angels appear in the heaven. I would think that would be the sign, right? But that's not how the writer puts it, and that's not how God does it. He says, "I'm going to sneak this in. It's not going to be something that's going to catch your attention." Now that he had their attention, he sends in the choir and the shepherds, who are not the most influential people in town. They take off. They head over. And Luke is very aware. All these people they said the Messiah has been born. They're very aware of hundreds of years of prophecy. Isaiah, 550, 600 years earlier, had said he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, and so forth. And then Luke adds, and he will be a baby swaddling clothes. Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father, and a baby in swaddling clothes. So here's this description of this God. And who is he? An earthly king, a prophet of old, or is it God himself? John, the writer, would write post the death of Christ. He said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." This is the true light that gives light to everyone. This is who was coming into the world. And he was in the world, and the world was made through him, and yet the world did not recognize him. They missed it. Most of the world missed it. And the Word, however, became flesh and dwelt among us. And John writes, "And we have seen his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father, this glory full of grace and truth."
It's a crazy story. He's pre-creation. He's eternal. He's before everything. He creates everything. He shows up in his creation. They're like, and who are you? Isn't that wild? You ever watch that show? I don't even think it's on anymore. Undercover Boss, right? The guy who owns the place comes and starts washing dishes, and they're like, "You're doing it wrong. You know, you don't know how this place works. Let me explain this thing to you. You're new here." And meanwhile, he's just humbly like, with his fake beard and his funny wig on. He's like, yeah, I don't know how this place runs. And that's kind of how our Jesus came in. And people just looked right past him, didn't even recognize him, except for a few.
And isn't that like the $10,000 question we're addressing we started with this morning? Who are you? And who are you? You ask that question, just in your casual relationships out there, or the woman across the counter at the Starbucks or wherever, like, hey, who do you think this Jesus was? This is a perfect season to be doing that. Merry Christmas. Can I ask you about that? Season's greetings. What season was that? Who are you? I think everybody here in this room at some point has had to come to grips with that question. And who are you? Remember Tozer's words? Our mental image of God arises and falls. There can be a season in my life where I'm just like, I guess have this intellectual sort of kind of information about, just a wonderful teacher. Or, maybe just the baby Jesus thing. I just love that. I just love that picture because I love babies. Jesus, he was that kind of fed those guys he did the loaves and fishes thing, right? Or, peace on earth. Yeah, I'm into that. Peace on earth, yeah. But that question, and who are you? So Matthew, a different writer with a different style, would record this kind of camera angle on what was happening. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod. So he gives some political context. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. Wise men. Magi, we get our word magicians from this word. They were most likely astrologers, or really the scientists of their day, and asked King Herod, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We've seen his star rise, and we've come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Jerusalem, of course, is this capital, this Jewish capital, occupied by a Roman foreign government. And so Herod called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law and asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written." These keepers of the religion, these keepers of the law, quote scripture and verse, word for word. "But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among all the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." He quotes scripture and verse right there that Jason read earlier. And then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for this. Who are you? And as soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." There's a politician using the exact same language that we use. After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh.
It'd be no small journey. I know when we dress our kids up in bathrobes and give them grandpa's cane for a shepherd's crook, they just have to walk from one side of the stage to the other, the Magi's journey. But in real life, they probably would have come from as far as Iran or Iraq, 500-600 miles at a minimum. They could have come from farther away than that. I know we also picture 3 of them, although it never says that there's 3. But really, there probably would have been more of an entourage. You don't travel long distances like that at that time without a caravan, without being a group of people for safety's sake. So they just think about that. These guys looked up into the sky. These heathen men, not knowing the true God of the universe, looked up in the sky and said, "There's something going on. And we care enough about this that we're going to uproot our whole life and take a very long trip and put everything on hold, maybe even risk our lives to go and find out what that is." That's worth thinking about. What do we care enough about to move towards? Because as we read from Tozer, we move towards our image of God. What are we moving towards? Pay attention to the news lately at Kaiser Station, what's going on down there? In-N-Out Burger. I got to get me one of them In-N-Out burgers. People just have to drive all the way to California to get one of those. But now they're coming from Seattle. They're driving down from Seattle to get an In-N-Out Burger. And that's fine. I don't care. You can drive a couple hundred miles and get yourself a good burger. But you'll be sorry in a little bit too. You're like, oh.
No, somebody this weekend had waited in line 3 hours to get the burger, and someone asked, "Was it worth it?" And he said, "Oh, it was so worth it." I'm not picking on burgers or In-N-Out or your taste.
I love burgers.
Right? Yeah, but I just love the language. It was worth it. It was worthy of the wait. He came from Seattle, 200 miles. Wow, was that? Oh, it was worthy of the journey. And what was it? Oh, it was an animal-style double, or whatever you get. Right? And it was worthy. I'd love you to tack on the HY on the end of that. It was worthy. It was worthy. I mean, I'm sorry to be repetitious here, but. And so they bring gold and frankincense and myrrh to this baby that they really don't know who it is yet. Who is it? But they bring gifts. What do you bring like the creator of the universe for his birthday? Some of some of the older folks in here, you ever had that, like, I don't know what to get my dad. Like, he has everything. And if he wants something, he's just going to go buy it, right? You know, so you kind of just, isn't that true? Like my 6-year-old grandson is easy. I mean, it's just the easiest person in the world. I can just go to Walmart and there's aisle after aisle of stuff that he would just be excited to have, right? But man, you get up to in your 50s and 60s and it's like, come on, Lee, what do I get you? And in your garage, anything I could dream of is probably in there. Right? I mean, right? What do you get somebody that seems to, what do you get the creator of the universe? What do you get him? Oh, this latest tablet? Right? Do you get him a gift card to Outback? What do you get the creator of the universe? And they bring, what do they bring? They bring gold and frankincense and myrrh. Why? You know, when the person you're honoring has everything, the gifts are no longer like care packages to help them get through life. Oh, you're going to need this gold and you're going to need this frankincense and this myrrh thing. No, at that point, the gifts are a reflection of the worth of the person you're honoring. The gifts now, this gold they become a statement. You're the owner of everything in the universe. And so I let go of my gold, and I say to you, you own everything. I could use this gold to buy something for me, but I let it go because you are worth it all. This frankincense, which was a sign of royalty, which was only rich people had fancy spices and perfumes, I let this go because you're the rightful ruler of the universe. This myrrh that is used to embalm the dead, I give this to you recognizing that you're the eternal one. You're the eternal one. All that stuff was just stuff, but it had deep significance, I believe, in the letting go of the worth of this baby they recognized.
So in the contrast, you have these men who see his worth and his value, even with very little revelation yet. Don't even know. They have to ask the other wise men of Jerusalem, where, you know, what's going on? Who is this Messiah that we came looking for? But then there's Herod. Herod, who actually he had a lot of Jewish knowledge, but his reaction is very different. Matthew 2:16-18 says, when Herod realized that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, because they'd actually been told to not go back to him, not report to him, that he was disingenuous in saying that he wanted to come and worship. So when he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled, a voice heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. So here's his mental image of God. Strength, power, tyranny. That's the God he worships. And he's become just like that God. And he uses that strength and power not to admit someone's worthiness, but rather to wipe out any rivals, anyone who is a rival for that power, because he wants to be God.
Think about this. Remember the word of Luke? This baby, not the angels, this baby will be assigned to you. And now Herod is murdering babies all across the region. Genocide, literally murdering boys under 2 years of age. This will be assigned to you. One person, the baby provokes worship and sacrifice. Another person, this baby provokes anger and murderous hatred. Jesus said these words, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. In fact, if you belong to the kingdom of this world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I've chosen you out of it. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they would obey yours also. He's speaking to those worshipers in spirit and in truth, the followers of Jesus. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they did not know the one who sent me. But this is to fulfill what is written in their law. And he reaches back into the Old Testament in several places. They hated me without cause. They hated me without a reason. So this baby, on one hand, in one group of people, provokes travel, sacrifice, worship. On the other hand, among the people who should have known better than any of them, the Jews, he provokes nothing. They go back home and go to sleep. They don't even make an effort to go investigate. And in this murderous politician It provokes hatred and genocide. It's just the crazy, all about a baby, all around this baby. Who is this baby? So these two passages, the Jews, the Romans, the Magi, the Gentiles, and so forth, the foreigners, are all moved by what we mentioned earlier, the secret law of the soul. You know, there's a great chorus. It's written, I don't know who wrote it. It's Hillsong Music, but they said, "King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above, humbly you came to the earth you created, all for love's sake became poor." He's describing this journey we're talking about here right now. That rich became poor, powerful became weak, strength became vulnerable, all for love's sake. And so my response is, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. The Paul would write in the book of Corinthians, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for our sake he became poor, so that you and I, through his poverty, might become rich."
He's born into our world so that we can be born again into his. He comes into a tyrant's kingdom so that we can come into the kingdom of a good and perfect king. Galatians describes it as adoption. Galatians 4:4-7 says, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father." So you're no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has made you also an heir.
So this worship thing, as we finish up here, worship is what waiting people do. Worship is what willing people do. Worship is not just, I know it's the 30 minutes or so before it's in our rhythm, our routine here, but it's far more than what Tiffany and Jacob just led us in. Worship is a stance of the heart. Worship is like the anthem of those shepherds. Yeah, that worship is our anthem. You know how certain things have theme songs, you know, your favorite sports team or whatever, you have this anthem. A country has a national anthem that reflects its values. Worship is the anthem. And when we come together like we do here, the thing we agree on is maybe not our politics or our economics or our whatever, but what we agree on is, you know what? You know who this is? He's worthy. We want to finish with just something a little different this morning. There's a video we want to show you. It's a worship leader, in fact. Chris Tomlin is his name. And they're covering a song written by a guy named Andy Peterson. And it's just a group of people that have gathered to worship. But I want you to pay attention. We'd love you to pay attention just to the flow of the song. Because it's kind of a refrain and response type of a song. They ask a question, and then the congregation answers. And so if you've never seen it, just relax and settle down. If you've seen it and you want to enter in, feel free to do that. And then we'll finish with communion. But we're just going to watch this together as we wrap up this morning.